I'm Grace.
I'm Julie.
I'm Eric.
I'm Yunxin.
I'm Sloane.
I'm Erin.
Dana.
And we're here to talk to you guys today about the movie we watched, Wonder. Does anyone want to give a quick synopsis of the movie? Talk about the plot a little?
So it focuses around this little boy, August, but he goes by Augie, and he has some form of a facial deformity. It's a lot of scarring and stuff, and he's going into fifth grade, but it's about his transition from homeschool to a public school.
A big thing about Augie is that he recognizes the fact that when he covers his facial deformity that he does have, he feels a lot more confident. So he will walk around in a mask, and he'll feel as though he's just a regular kid.
For example, one of the scenes was the Halloween scene, and a couple things that Augie mentioned was that on Halloween he walks with his head up high, and people will go up to him and high five him when he's wearing a mask because they don't know what's underneath it. And when he's not wearing a Halloween costume, people don't touch him because they think he's contagious. Yeah.
They refer to it as the plague.
Or the cheese touch.
Yeah. And when he first got enrolled into the school, he got a tour from 3 different kids. And what he did mention was that kids are actually not as good at hiding their faces. So that kind of just stuck out too, because he didn't feel that connection with the kids yet. And
Another thing about, the anonymity of the mask was that people couldn't see him when they wanted to talk about him. So whenever they were making fun of him and didn't realize he was in the room, that would be something that was super upsetting to him because he felt as though people were just talking about him behind his back because they thought he wasn't there when in reality he was.
Some kid asked Augie, and I think it was his classmate, if he tried to get surgery to fix his face, and he kind of made light of it and was like, it took me 27 surgeries to look this good, which I thought was good. Instead of looking down on himself.
Yeah, for sure. And another quote that I took down was that Augie mentioned that kids aren't so good at hiding it. People would ask if he ate special food and asked what's the deal with his face. So just insensitive questions like that were asked a lot to him.
A lot of in the first few days of, I think it was the first day he came back from school, he had a little braid that he had on his side, which was a part of his identity, and he got bullied so much that he just chopped it off without thinking. So the fact that the kids, even with just one day, that they could tear away these levels of his identity through their bullying.
Especially when it's considered something so normal. If anybody in our class had something like that, nobody would make fun of somebody in our class that had something like that, or had their hair a certain way or something. But just because he had this physical deformity, they thought that everything was fair game to make fun of him for. So
there was one example too where in the beginning, I think it was Mr. Brown's class, was it? When they had to say 3 things about them or something important, and so he shared that he really liked Star Wars, and from that point on, Julian, which was one character that really wasn't nice to him at all, you started calling him Dark Sidious because he looked like the character that had a deformed face within the movie.
Yeah, and then going back to when he dressed up in his Halloween costume, he actually walked in on some people he thought were his friends talking about him, thinking that it was someone else because he wasn't looking how he usually does, and he overheard some kids saying that he always reminded them of a shrunken head and that if they looked like him, they would kill themselves.
Yeah, and that just goes back to how we all treat people with disabilities. When you see something like that, just really being able to actively respond and say hey, that's not cool, you can't do things like that. Pretty much what we were talking about in classes about the responses that we give to these negative sayings that people say about people with disabilities. It really is just about setting an example, especially for children who are so vulnerable and able to be molded, just teaching them that saying things like that is absolutely not okay to anybody, especially somebody with a disability, that they can't help. It's really just about, starting them young, like teaching them how to properly interact with these people with disabilities.
And after that scene with Halloween, he came home and was obviously upset. And he talked to his mother about it. His mom said, "You're not ugly, and anyone who cares to know you will see that." But he still, to him, it didn't matter because he said it still matters that I look different, which is true because it changes his social interaction. But the fact that, a 10 or 11-year-old boy is so just torn apart and so aware of the way he looks and the way it makes people feel is just heartbreaking.
I also think, yes, his mom said people who take the chance to know you, the time to know you, will love you and accept you, but these kids also just weren't taking the time to get to know them. They would back up from him at school when he tried to approach them. They would say he had the cheese touch. So it's hard from his point of view to hear that from his mom when no one's even giving him the opportunity to get to know him.
I feel like his outlooking makes him more sensitive than other boys, so he just really care about what people view him and what they're thinking about him.
I kind of wish they used someone for the movie that actually had a face deformity, because I researched after and saw that it was just a normal looking kid. I feel like that could have been better.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to when we watched the I'm so sorry, the movie with Art and the Music Within. Sorry, when we watched The Music Within, when they said that, I think they said that Art was not actually somebody who had a disability; he was just portraying somebody who had a disability. And it goes back to how people are portrayed in the media. Why couldn't they have just gotten somebody who I'm sure would be more than happy to be the main actor in a movie who has an actual disability, rather than using those that technology to make it look like he actually has that disability.
I wonder why movies and TV shows don't use people who actually portray that disability.
I think it comes down to a lot of the idea, and this is not just within the disability community, but just the idea of that representation really matters in our media. And things like, why aren't they using, an actor with a facial deformity or who actually has CP, is I think that there's still, regardless,
trying to sell something.
Yes, they're trying to sell something, and also I think that they're still fearful of working with someone with the actual disability because it comes down to what we were talking about today of worrying about saying the wrong thing or not thinking that they're capable of it.
Yeah, I was thinking it's definitely societal's perception of not being capable of fulfilling the task, but they're not that's not true at all.
It's also just it's not wanting to put in the effort to if there is an issue or if you do have to spend extra time trying to teach them that people just don't want to do that. And I just think that by taking a little extra time to prove to somebody I'm willing to work with you, I'm willing to do whatever you need to do to make you the best version of yourself, whether it's in acting or any other career. I just think again, it's important that people without disabilities take that time out to show I'm including you in this no matter what it is.
I agree. So talking about the model used for this movie, I thought that they used the biomedical model. I thought that was portrayed because Augie was born with a rare medical face deformity called mandibulofacial dystosis, and he mentioned in the movie that he went through 27 different surgeries to try and help with that, and a biomedical model is a medical impairment that surgery can be used to help. So I think that model fits well with this movie, and
agreed.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think that does kind of make it harder, on a child with, who that does express, that kind of disability, just because there's nothing that they can do themselves to make it go away or to fix it or to try to hide something like that, as opposed to, when you have an invisible disability, such as in, The Music Within, when Richard didn't go around telling everybody he was deaf, people didn't even know. He would just read lips and it would just be, he would go on with his life. But I think it's so much harder, especially for children, which is what I was saying before, to have something that they really can't change themselves without an expensive surgery or expensive doctors. That's not everybody might be able to afford.
Yeah, I also think it made it. I don't I think it made it hard that he came into school late, that he was homeschooled for so many years.
Agreed.
He was definitely super sheltered from society, which I don't blame his mom because society can be cruel, but the only way to immerse society into it is to have him immersed into the school.
Yeah, and the parents too were very like still debating in the beginning.
Yeah,
they're
they're
not the
fighting over
same.
it.
And I'm pretty sure, like, the second something went wrong, his mom wanted to pull him out of school.
Yeah.
Like, instead of having him, unfortunately, it's hard to deal with it, but that's the only way that he's going to get
People
through
also
it.
thought that just because he had a disability that he wasn't smart when actually he was like very
Right.
Yeah, an example like when he got that tour and Julian was like, "Oh, this is a science lab, but like I'm sure you won't be spending a lot of time in there." And then he like covered it up after
Yeah.
his friend like corrected him and was like, "Oh no, I mean because you're homeschooled."
Right. And he ended up being really smart and, like, top of his class in
Yeah.
science.
I just feel like if he like still in the homeschool and do not go to the school, do not getting along with people, I feel it will be like a prevent for his like later life.
Mm-hmm.
If like he grew up as an adult, I think it's much harder to get into the society and other stuff.
And it
Like
all
if he had
does.
to get a job and he
Right.
wasn't around people.
And because of his face and
Yeah.
other stuff.
It all really does like come back to giving these children the opportunity to live that kind of normal life. Like if his parents had given him the opportunity to attend public school in the first place, or if like these kids had given him the opportunity to just like show himself for more than just his face, I think that really just comes down to like how we're supposed to integrate people with disabilities into normal society.
And also, with accompanying his social isolation, even the simple act of, he made a friend, and how astronomical that was to, number one, his mom, seeing her reaction, because they walked out of school together, and she was like, oh my gosh, like, he did it, and they showed an image of, a cutaway of him. He always wore a little astronaut helmet to cover his face, because he felt comfortable in it, he always loved space, but they had an image of him in his astronaut suit, jumping, and just like the pure joy that brings someone, the human connection, because he'd been deprived of it besides his family for so long. So just given the opportunity to just be a kid.
Right.
I also think you can look deeper into that and say that the astronaut helmet, like, symbolized his insecurities and, like, his fear of starting school, something so new like that.
Yeah, and I feel like it was also like a huge symbol throughout it because there was a time in which he was trying to find it and he couldn't, and then you see like at the end like his father revealed like, oh, I had it in my like office the whole time. I just wanted like you to just really rejoice like what you're going through.
Yeah, I think I have like a quote on here that it shows the transition of the parents' mindset from the beginning of the movie. In the beginning of the movie, the dad mentioned something about how sending Augie to school would be sending a lamb to the slaughter. So they were super uncomfortable with the idea and just kind of knew from the get-go that kids wouldn't be open to getting to know him. So they were definitely scared to send him off to school.
I feel like because Augie was like getting the feedback from the public, from the other people's. So like if the negative thinking, I think it will like influence him a lot, like in some ways. But like he have to accept it, and he have to like deal with it. So therefore, like he can grow up and.
I think he does a really good job of accepting it. I think he like rolls with the punches, and he has his support system at home. Like his family's super supportive of everything. They don't put up any barriers for him other than the homeschooling, which I would say would be a little bit of a barrier, but at the same time, they were trying to protect him and help him.
Yeah, it's definitely hard as a parent when
You know,
people are going to treat your kid badly, and you kind of just have to do it because it's the best for him.
right.
Like the first day that he went to school, he was like, please let them be nice to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do like how that one time when it was after his first day of school and like at home he wasn't really talking, like when his parents asked how his first day of school was, like he wasn't like, he was giving like sharp like it was fine like type of answers, and afterwards they like talked to him and like he opened up and said like how he was upset because he feels like he's ugly and everything, and I really like thought the one line that really stood out to me was, you can't blend in when you're born to stand out. And, like, I feel like they did a really good job, like, helping him, like, get back on his feet for day 2. And, like, it's very important to, like, get that support.
Agreed. And, like, even just, like, the support of some of his teachers was really inspiring. Like, when the teacher confronted the parents of the bully that was bullying him in school.